This is Sexy Funny Raw, where we chat all about the world of sex, from dating and relationships all the way to the adult industry itself. I'm Silvia Saige, and this is my Pornspective, answering all the questions you weren't even brave enough to ask Google. Get ready, because Sexy Funny Raw starts now.
We are back. I am so excited. Thank you guys so much. Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Funny Raw. I am your host, Silvia Saige, joined in studio with my co-host, Dr. Eddie, giving us public health perspective. And we are truly blessed this month to have in studio guest Angelina Mirenda, who is a comedian, actor, and sex activist herself. So welcome to the show, Angelina.
Hi, guys.
This week, you guys, we are going deep, and we are talking dub. We are talking dubstep. No, dance moves all day. Okay, we are talking dom sub roles, and we are going to get real deep into it, right? So when we think of dom and sub roles, obviously I feel like most people's brains go to 50 Shades of Grey, because that's what we know, and that's the book and the movie and the series and everything that we saw. But there's so much more to it than even what we see in pornography. Obviously, pornography is giving you a very exaggerated fantasy.
And curated.
Directed, proper lighting, the whole 9 yards. So but this week, we're going to get into it a little bit more, and we're going to talk about the things. We're going to talk about the whips and the ropes and the role play, and, just get a little bit about the dub. I keep saying dub. Dom sub relationship. It's a combination of the two words together. Yeah, and it's hard to separate. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the roles that we're playing in this, and what BDSM really stands for, and what we're getting into in this episode. Dr. Eddie, bring it to you. Just on the spot. Surprise! Here you go.
So what I would say is that dom sub relationships are a common way for people maybe interested in some kink, maybe putting their toe in the water of BDSM, interested in exploring a little bit of role play potentially. And so we have previously we discussed role playing more generally. Yeah. And so the dom sub is like a very specific subset within the role playing community.
So I think the best way to think about a dom sub relationship is the consensual, eroticized exchange of power. Right? Because sex is about power, right? Everything in life is about sex except for sex, and sex is about power, right? Very famous quote.
Power and love, right? Those are the...
Oh, love. We got to throw that in there as well. Yeah. Let's remember we are consenting to having
theater
this.
Kid joke
Yeah, there you go. I love it. So let's talk about it. The DS in the acronym, the BDSM, which stands for bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, right? And I think sometimes the sadism also is
in place of submission.
In place of submission, right? Okay,
yeah.
Perfect.
And then the M is
masochism. Yes, which I feel like can have a very negative connotation, but that's really what we should be discussing, right?
Yes.
So you mentioned earlier that the creator of the BDSM term in general is not a great human. Let's dive.
So first I'm going to give you a little rundown, and then I think it would be great if we could get people in the comments giving their input on this as well. It can be a group project. BDSM, so sadism and masochism, are named after two historical figures. The first is the Marquis de Sade. That dude sucks. Lots of non-consensual issues with the way that he approached sex and BDSM. And then the second is, I hope I'm saying this right, the Sacher Masoch. These two terms were coined by Kraft Ebing in his book, which was actually about psychopathy in sex. So not off to a great start.
Right.
Now we understand that BDSM is a, when it's practiced correctly, ethical pursuit of eroticism that is consensual and responsible. I think we should come up with a new mascot for BDSM. So I'm going to float Tony the Tiger in a leather daddy outfit.
Because it's great.
Exactly.
I love it. Is that a reference that's too old, though? Is the Tony the Tiger still a thing?
I could be
today?
dating myself.
Yeah, I don't even know if it is. I haven't seen a commercial for him in so long. I don't know if it's still a thing there.
Gen Z, get at us.
Yeah, we need to know. Is Tony the Tiger just a generational thing? Is he floated out by now?
I'd be hesitant to bring in animals.
Okay.
No, furries and anthros are also a part of the kink community.
True. Yeah, absolutely. But I think with any of this stuff, obviously consent, we always drive it home, but it is such a big part, especially of the BDSM environment. I always feel like, especially for on set with us, anytime I go into one of these scenes, it is a checklist beyond checklist. Normally when I show up to set, it's kind of like a sheet I will fill out, and it's, you know, my yeses and nos and what I'm okay with and what I'm not, whether it's hair pulling or slapping or something like that. But when it's a BDSM shoot, oh my God, it is like a document. You have to, like, pages upon pages, you have to just go through and check mark every little thing that you're willing to do and willing not to do. There's also so much, there's safe words going on, and if it's bondage in any way, it's you know, how comfortable are you? How comfortable can you stay in this rope tie-up? And a lot of times, I think people think that the tie-ups is an uncomfortable place to live, but when you're doing bondage correctly, there are so many ties that are very comfortable for the person to set in for long amounts of times. The ropes aren't necessarily tight on you, they're just holding you in. And especially, I don't know the real world of like bondage in a real life. I only know the commercial version and of pornography that I'm been in, but it's super comfortable. I never am even, there's not even marks on my hands afterwards. So it's a level of what you're willing to do. And obviously there is parts of, you know, the sadism where you are going to be leaving marks, because that is a part of it. You want to be getting, you know, hit the hardest with the whips and the, you know, doing these things. So there are obviously very much differentiations of levels of what people are comfortable with, but that's huge why consent in this arena is so important.
Yes, and also why a lot of people who practice BDSM go through like a learning process, and there are classes that you can purchase. There are free tools to help start everyone off, but especially if you're going to be the person who is tying the rope bunny into the ropes, or like putting somebody in bondage, or who is going to be the dominant, who's kind of like in charge of the boundaries and the rules of the scenes, it's important that you understand the power you have, the significance of that, how to keep everybody safe, including yourself. And I think that there needs to be some education surrounding that instead of just like jumping headlong into it.
Oh yeah, I want somebody to be a full-on like rope expert before I'm offering my hands up to any type of tie situation. Yeah, and just knowing that you're in a safe environment also, and that these ties are coming off, and you know, in a timely manner, and in the manner in which I want them to come off. Right. So. I think there's also a lot of like sex clubs, isn't there? Especially in the LA area. I don't know about where you're from, but especially in Los Angeles and bigger cities, I feel like there's a lot of clubs where you can go to and just watch. You can be a spectator before you join into anything. So there are different ways to kind of like see what even the options are. Because I feel like a lot of times if you aren't comfortable with even discussing BDSM, then you wouldn't even know what other options there are for this community. And like you mentioned, there's the furries and the everything else. Like it extends so far out, and just really your comfort level. So
I think the conversation could be really sexy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be at the moment you're going to do it, but if we're talking about role play, it'd be like, here is the contract. Why don't you tell me what it is that you're interested in doing? You know, and this could be like after dinner. So tell me what you're doing, and maybe on Saturday, this is all going to happen between 11 and 2 or whatever. I think it could be sexy. The conversation doesn't have to be weird and awkward all the time. But not everybody's comfortable having those kind of conversations. We talk about sex a lot. We're all educators. And so it becomes like second nature to have those conversations, whereas not everybody has that comfort level. Not only do they not maybe have the background or the exposure to a lot of these things, but they just have never done it before and all that stuff. So maybe create a scene around what's okay and what's not okay, and it doesn't have to be the moment of. Let's not decide right then, right? Let's decide at a separate moment. Let's decide at a different time, and let's try and make the whole conversation sexy, because it really is all about communication and consent across the board. And I know we really do talk about it a lot, but if we're not having the communication, then we're actually not having consent.
Right.
Yeah.
And Angeline, you mentioned there is a place where you can go, in the website where you can go and you both checklist what is comfortable for you, and then the website will then combine your list and only show you the things that you have both checked off, that you're both comfortable with. So it's kind of having the conversation for you to take out the awkwardness if that conversation is really what's keeping you from exploring things.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. If rejection is something that's stopping you, this takes that out of the equation.
Because they're only going to show you the two areas where you combine, which is great. I think that's beautiful. I never knew that existed, and I think that's fantastic, because again, not everybody has the communication skills. Not everybody feels as comfortable saying what they want to have done to them. And sometimes even myself, I feel like I'm very sexually versed when I'm in that intimate relationship. I mean, I have let a man eat my pussy wrong for far too long, and I just I fake moan it until he brings me up the penis, because I feel uncomfortable in that moment going, it's bad. What you're doing is so bad that I just squirm away and then avoid the
Bill, just stop with the alphabet. Just stop with the alphabet.
No
we don't
alphabet.
do that anymore.
Yes. No, we don't. We should have never done the alphabet. Let's be honest.
That's not how it works.
Yeah. But I mean, if the most versed person in sexuality can struggle in that moment, it's nice to have the conversations before or after, have someone else have the conversation for you. So I think it's brilliant.
In the moment, the stakes are always higher.
Yes.
I also think it's a great, so you would be familiar with this, like intimacy coordinators. So in intimacy coordinator training, one of the programs I've heard has had like a workshop wherein the first thing you have to do is you have to say no to every single thing that the person runs by you, because practice makes perfect. So getting it out there and learning to do it before you're in the moment gives you like a building block.
That's beautiful, because I feel like a lot of times in sex, you don't want to make the person feel less than, right?
Yes.
You don't want to say like what you're doing isn't right, because I feel like, and a lot of females and males maybe feel the same way, that if you say something, it may ruin the moment completely.
Yes.
And
We're also pretty
stop the
sensitive.
session. Yes.
Especially during sex.
Definitely.
Yes.
We're very vulnerable, and so that can manifest in a variety of ways, which can create anxiety. And so those conversations, the more you have them elsewhere, I mean, the better prepared you're going to be when you get to the event.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's just like training for anything else. Like, practice does make perfect. Let's be honest. I mean, I feel like a lot of times people like, if the sex isn't great the first time or for a second time, they're like, oh, the sex with them just isn't going to be good. No, it can grow, it can change, and you can have the conversations, and you can make the person the lover that you want them to be, and vice versa. As long as you're having those conversations and making the person feel comfortable is
willing.
Huge. Well, right.
If they're willing, right? Because we don't want to change anybody.
No,
right?
Of course.
But in relationships, sometimes that happens, where it's like, oh, I'm going to make him exactly what I want him to be, and so that becomes
Dr. Frankenstein.
That becomes its own problem. So I would be very just cautious about how we approach those things, just because we're all sensitive and we're all vulnerable, and whatever we might think, and guys, whatever our masculinity is, like the framework of our masculinity is not going to crumble because she says you can't eat pussy well, right? But some people do feel that way, and so we do have to be conscious of it to not like ruin the moment and be able to build healthy relationships, which is really ultimately everything we're talking about.
Or which the opposite can also happen, and maybe now you've angered this person. Now that you've gone, so like everything I've been doing is wrong, and you don't want to take it in that direction either. It's all meant to be like a happy, healthy conversation. It should never go into like that negative headspace, which it's easy to do.
We just don't talk about sex enough.
No.
Right? And because it's stigmatized and it's really put in like this really uncomfortable little box where no one wants to talk about it. The expectations are very high for everybody, right? Penis size, expertise, oral on both ends, right? And so on both ends, exactly, but for both for all partners.
Yeah.
And so all of those things make the stakes so high.
Right.
But it can also be incredibly damaging. And then it's creating an environment where people aren't talking about sex. They're just doing what they see in adult films, and that's not reality.
No.
But the expectations for a lot of men and women are sometimes what you see in those things, because we don't have a comprehensive sex education. A lot of people are getting their kind of knowledge from pornography, and that's, as we've discussed before, certainly not the
healthy.
intention. Well, it's not the intention of pornography to be the educator.
Yeah, no. And it shouldn't be, because it's still
Right.
a form of entertainment. And these are still actors who are being paid to do a job, and they are reading a script that has been written. And the whole scene is choreographed. So it's not... it's not real sex, is what I always try to tell people. Now, there are some sites who really focus on real sex. Bellesa is one of them, and they are my absolute favorite.
I love them.
Yes, I love them too. I think they're built for women.
Yes.
And the whole scene behind that is that the woman picks her mate, and you have real sex, and there is no timetable, and there is no set up. A lot of times in pornography, it's 5 minutes in this position, 5 minutes in this position, and it's a gauntlet that you have to checklist off and just go through: blowjob, eating out, and writing, and reverse cowgirl, and doggy, and all these things. As to where Bellesa is two individuals who just have sex, and however long the sex lasts, and it's beautiful, and it is a beautiful, beautiful sight. But that's not pornography, and even then, or that's not real life sex. But even then, it is real life sex. But we're still two actors, and we're still two very sexually advanced actors, who have been in our own sexuality for so long, and we've experienced so many different things that our sex is probably a different level, than the basics starting out. But that's why we want you to grow and expand and have more conversations and get to these places.
A colleague of ours, actually, Sherry DeVille, had said watching porn to learn about sex education is like watching the Fast and Furious to learn to drive.
Yes.
Right? And so when
Accurate.
she said that, she's like, I heard this recently, and I was like, wow, that is just so accurate.
It's spot on.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up too. It's a good one.
Yeah. But it is exactly that. It is a way enhanced version of what sex is. And that's not even the sex I'm having at home, So my sex is so different in, a real scenario. And it's never my kid. I'll tell you that right now. So. I don't have a kid.
Context,
I don't have a kid.
Let's add a little bit of context there.
I obviously do a lot of stepmommy, son or daughter pornography.
Before we started filming, we were talking about how sometimes it's an algorithm that's kind of feeding into those things. So there's so much adult film content that is stepson, stepdaughter, step everything. And so that could be somewhat troubling in certain environments, and so that's all we're talking about.
Yeah. Exactly. Little backstory there. Sorry, guys.
Is that also, though, kind of a form of a dom-sub relationship?
Oh,
wherein,
absolutely.
like, the step parent would have the authority, and there's some age play involved.
Exactly. All of that and more. Yeah. Because I am supposed to be the one convincing them that everything is okay. So
Put down the video game, Bobby.
Yeah.
Right.
Stepmommy needs you for something, Yeah. Which it does get a very, I don't even want to, I don't want to say the verbiage that I'm thinking in my head.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and there's different types of dom-sub relationships, which, we've talked about some of them, but what you're referencing, which is caregiver and little, is very popular. There is a whole, we talked about the alphabet with pussy eating.
Yes.
There's a whole alphabet of BDSM.
Yes.
So if you see DDLG, or is it what is it, DMLB?
I don't know.
They're it's daddy dom, little girl.
Oh.
They have all these different acronyms to
Lord.
suggest which pairing you are participating in.
Interesting. See, I don't even know all the sides of BDSM.
I don't either.
I know the very curated side. So that's my perspective, is the porn perspective.
I would imagine that a lot of young men or people in general are learning from the adult film industry, and so that's their first tap into that world. And so that presents its own potential hazards because it's so curated and all of those things. And you think that that's how it is. That's the expectation. You know, there's not always a lot of consent in the adult film industry video component of it, even though there's a lot before and after and all of those things that you've mentioned. And so that difference, I think, is really important.
Yeah, what you don't realize is that on the side of me doing BDSM is a whole staff of people willing to come to my aid at any point in time. Yeah, absolutely. Literally people there to just wipe my bum. That's their whole job when I'm tied to a cage. Yeah. So it's a whole show going on behind what I'm actually doing. So
no one wants a cum drippy bum.
No one wants that.
That's fair.
Nobody
People
wants
do.
that.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Not on camera. Not on camera. You don't. There's that like little moment where the camera will pan up to your face, and even if I didn't know something was coming out of me, I do now, because it's the pan up to your face where someone will come and wipe your butt, and then you just make some awesome face, and then they pan back to your ass that's now been cleaned and wiped. So yeah, that's a little porn secret.
Filmmaking is wild.
It is,
man.
isn't it? Yeah, it's great.
Theoretically, I would wonder if the filmmaker can also be considered like a power dynamic, right?
Oh, like as a role play?
As a role play.
Yes.
Because why not, right?
Well, I will tell you that, I mean, having someone film does put a whole new level of like sexuality into the situation, because it's the voyeurism of it, you know, and performing in front of people is very exhilarating. I can't imagine how it's not that for everyone, but for me it is like, watch me have sex, you know? So I get...
There's so much in the world now of so much content that celebrities have made, right? And all of that stuff gets put out there, whether it's intentional or not, is probably up for debate in certain instances, right? Because a lot of it, or some of it potentially, is very curated and then leaked and all of that stuff. But some of these things are intentional, whereas in other cases, they're definitely not intentional and it was a violation, right? And so there's a lot of nuance there that I think is often not discussed, right? Because leaked means bad, but leaked is not the same all the time.
Yes.
Every instance of something being leaked in media is not actually leaked.
A publicity stunt is different than revenge porn.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
But revenge porn is absolutely a thing, and so making sure that we understand that nuance and distinction, I think, is super important.
Yes. And they should always be consenting to being on film as well. Let's just go ahead and put that out there. Putting a camera in the corner of a room and not letting anybody know that camera is there is very wrong and very illegal.
Yes. Yes.
And super common in a lot of instances, or was, right? And then things would get posted and people didn't know. And so that can be really, really damaging to people. And so it's just not fair and not right.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, too, if we're talking about like the DS dynamic, that there is talk about like fake doms, which are people that don't actually have the heart of like the erotic dynamic in their intentions. They are there to manipulate, abuse, control.
Right.
I'm listening to this great audiobook. It's called The Loving Dominant by John and Libby Warren. So he is the dominant in their dynamic and she is the submissive. They're married. And there's this quote that says, the essence of this kind of play is to take another's power and then use it for mutual pleasure. Right. So,
nice.
You know, it's it's symbiotic relationship. Right. And then talking about that relationship, like as a lifestyle, people practice it in different forms. There's an essay by Diane Vera in the Lesbian S&M Safety Manual, and she talks about the 9 degrees of submission. So she kind of does it chronologically. There's a lot of interplay. People drift in and out of roles. But there's a difference between somebody who like wants to be subservient within a scene for the sake of like their own pleasure versus somebody who wants to be subservient in a more long running dynamic for the actual sake of their dom's pleasure. And like that relinquishing of control is like much more total than it would be if you were like role playing.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that this is a part to do for the mutual benefit of both partners, because that's exactly why you should be taking part in this type of situation. It should be to bring joy to both of you. You shouldn't have a dom basically just controlling you and making it their sexual fantasy. It should never be one person's sexual fantasy. Both of you should have this same fantasy and be going down the same road because it's something you're both into. You should not be doing any of these types of things, any sexual anything, without wanting to actually be doing it. I would never say go into this because you're looking to please this person, because you should be both looking to please each other. We're talking only happy, healthy, consensual relationships here. We're not talking any forcible things by any stretch of the imagination.
And also, people seek different things from BDSM.
Yeah.
If we talk about like the psychology of it, there's a whole fucking minefield there. So we don't need to get into that. But the point is that like what drives anyone to kinky sex or more like mainstream vanilla sex is different person to person. Some people are after, so like they divide in this book the idea of like submission and dominance into stimulus driven. So like looking for the physical sensation that's happening, whips, flogs, anything, wax play, anything like that.
Right, because it doesn't all have to be sex.
Correct.
Right.
Yes. There's that. And then there's like relationship driven. So specifically looking for the connection with usually a particular person as opposed to just anybody. And then there's fantasy driven, which is I think more about like the scene and the dynamic.
Right.
And like them either talking about a fantasy together or figuring out a way to safely enact that fantasy together.
No, absolutely. I love that. God. I just love you so much. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks, girl.
Okay. What else do we need to add to this? You feel good?
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we have really explored a lot about the dom-sub relationship, of how very much consensual and communication are key to making this a happy, healthy part of your relationship and your dynamic, and have fun with it and really get to talking and write that fun list at dinner and, slip it over to the side of their table and see what they might be interested in doing a little bit later or tomorrow or next week or when you're on that vacation, and really get to know each other and switch up the roles, make it fun and do it safely. And we wish you luck in that. So, Angeline, can you tell the people where they can find you and all of your sex expertise?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram at AP Sex Education, Advanced Placement Sex Education for all of my nerds. And then I'm on TikTok at AP Segs, SEGGS Ed, to avoid the RoboCops.
Love it. And Dr. Eddie, thank you as always for your public health perspective. And guys, until next time, adios.